American politician Tim Walz is now the governor of Minnesota. He began serving on January 7, 2019. From 2007 to 2019, Walz served as the first congressional district representative for Minnesota before taking office as governor. His political affiliation is with the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, which is a part of the Democratic Party. Prior to entering politics, Walz had a career in education and was a member of the National Guard. His administration has prioritized infrastructure, healthcare, and education. In American politics, Tim Walz might not be the most well-known figure. But starting on Tuesday, the governor of Minnesota will play a major role in the presidential race as the Democratic running mate of Vice President Kamala Harris. With her party's nomination locked up for the polls on November 5, Harris announced her decision for vice president, stating she was proud of her selection. Harris chose Walz. In his roles as a governor, coach, teacher, and veteran, he has provided support to families with working parents. Having him on the team is fantastic, Harris wrote on X. Walz described being selected as Harris's vice presidential choice as the honor of a lifetime. I'm fully committed. It brings back memories of my first day of school. So, people, let's finish this up. He made a post on X. Vice presidents assist in running the White House as prospective successors and collaborators, even if their official responsibilities are restricted. They serve as excellent campaign surrogates as running mates. Walz is seen as a steadfast supporter of the right to an abortion. In addition, he has supported other climate efforts, such as a bill that would require Minnesota to switch to carbon-free electricity by 2040. Republicans will probably claim that Walz has an overly liberal record, but the governor hasn't wavered from his positions. Aside from domestic matters, the U.S.'s stance on the Gaza war and the rising tensions in the Middle East are emerging as major issues in this election cycle. Governors do not set foreign policy, but Walz has stated that he supports Israel and that, in response to Hamas's attack on October 7, flags should be flown at half-staff in show of support for the U.S. partner. Walz has also adopted pro-Israel stances while in Congress. In 2010, he had declared, with a commitment to values of personal freedoms and liberties, surrounded by a pretty tough neighborhood, Israel is our truest and closest ally in the region. But in March, Walz said he understood the mounting dissatisfaction with the U.S. policy after over 19% of Democratic voters in Minnesota cast uncommitted votes in protest of President Joe Biden's unwavering support for Israel. He claimed that uncommitted voters had every right to be heard. These people are requesting a deviation from the path. They are requesting increased pressure, Walz said at the time to NPR News. It's encouraging to see that people are actively seeking change and casting their votes, even though they are frustrated, he said. Tim Walz was not selected for any position by U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota holds a position that is distinct from government employment. As vice president, Kamala Harris would not be able to appoint state governors. It's possible that you have a different context or name confusion in mind. Tell me about the scenario or occasion you have in mind, and I can give you more exact details. Tim Walz's history as a former National Guard member and high school teacher makes him stand out. Walz was well known for his engaging teaching style and dedication to education at Mankato West High School in Minnesota, where he taught social studies before going into politics. Walz also spent 24 years in the Army National Guard, including one deployment to Iraq. His approach to public service is shaped by his military and educational experiences, with a focus on leadership, service, and community engagement. Among American governors, this dual background is relatively uncommon, which adds to his unique political viewpoint. Tim Walz and Donald Trump's political race would depend on a number of variables, such as the particular election they are running in, their campaign tactics, the political atmosphere at the time, the emotion of the electorate, and other dynamic features. Donald Trump is currently a well-known member of the Republican Party and a former president. On the other hand, Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota and a member of the Democratic Farmer Labor Party who focuses on state-level concerns. With his wide national reputation and experience as president, Trump would have a large name recognition and a solid support base in a national competition like the presidential election. Conversely, Walz would have to establish a national platform and appeal to voters outside of his home state of Minnesota. The nature of the fight would be very different in a state-level competition, such as a governorship race. In that scenario, Trump would have to adjust to state-specific challenges and run a successful state campaign, whereas Walz would have a history as a current governor and be more conversant with local issues. In the end, the result would be determined by the unique circumstances surrounding the contest, such as the pertinent issues, voter turnout, and campaign efficacy. Tim Walz's career has been interesting and varied. Here are some noteworthy, and possibly obscure, facts about him. Walz completed 24 years of active duty in the Army National Guard, where he attained the rank of Command Sergeant Major. He deployed to Iraq as part of his service and took part in a number of missions there. His time in the military had a big impact on his leadership style and views on public service. Teaching career: Walz taught social studies in high school before going into politics. He was well known for his dynamic and interactive teaching methods, which included enticing pupils to participate actively in their education and leading them on informative field trips. First in his family, Walz is the family member that has gone to college first. After graduating from Chadron State College in Nebraska with a bachelor's degree, he went on to Minnesota State University in Mankato to obtain a master's degree. Tim Walz attained one of the highest enlisted ranks in the Army during a 3-decade military service. His retirement date was criticized by a few peers. The United States military was undergoing a transition in the 1980s. After the Vietnam War ended, a military force that had previously consisted of drafted soldiers who had battled and lost their lives in Southeast Asian jungles was shifting to a volunteer-only force. Tim Walz was one of those volunteers in Nebraska. On April 8, 1981, just 2 days after turning 17, Mr. Walz, who is currently the governor of Minnesota and the presumed Democratic nominee for vice president, raised his hand to enlist in the Army National Guard. During his 30-year military career, he overcame floods, headed an artillery battalion, and attained one of the Army's highest enlisted levels. Alongside his part-time work as an enlisted combat arms soldier, which prepared him for battle, he managed a full-time career as a social studies teacher. Mr. Walz stayed out of combat. He served during a time when America was cautious of putting troops into long-term conflict overseas due to its embarrassment from foreign entanglements. And it stopped as the military prepared for war following September 11 at the age of 41 for Mr. Walz. Following his selection this week as Vice President Kamala Harris's running partner, he has been the target of accusations made by Minnesota Republicans earlier this year and now heightened by J.D. Vance, the running mate of former President Donald J. Trump.